Yesterday we learned a three-way machlokes about loike umeis, loike and have a chiv chorus, and if none of the above. So Rabbi Shmuel held that. Rabbi Shmuel held that sai ein loike, sai loike umeis with a Mrs. Besden and sai loike with chorus. Rabbi Kiva said you cannot be loike umeis with a Mrs. Besden, but you could get makos for chorus. And the Gemara Svara at the end was because even though he didn't do tshuva yet, and right now when you're giving him malchus, he's still online to get chorus, but we don't know for sure, like Psikolanu, because it's possible he'll do tshuva. And then there's the third sheet of Rabbi Yitzchak, who holds that sai for chayv krisus, sai for chayv Mrs. Bezin, there is no malchus. Those were the three sheeters that we learned yesterday, and we explained Rabbi Kiva shita, we explained Rabbi Shmuel shita, and I believe today we're going to be explaining the shita of Rabbi Yitzchak. So we're at the top of Yudal Adam Aleph, where we just finished the third line. Since it's possible that he could still do tshuva, he might not get his chorus, and therefore he can get malchus. Rabbi Yitzchak, he was the one who said, all of the chayv krisos are hookish one to another, and therefore whatever Allah applies to one will apply to the other. So therefore, even if the Torah wouldn't have specifically said that by a choisei there's a chiv chorus, we would have known there's a chiv chorus by a choisei because it's in the klal of all the other arayos for which the Torah says that they all have a halacha of chorus. So the reason why it was yotza chorus by choisei is ladoinai b'chorus v'loy b'malchus. It's to tell us that not only by the chorus of a choisei, but by all the chayv krisos, you only get chorus and you don't get malchus, because this is a case of dover sheyotzim min haklal, dover shehoy b'chlal, yotzim min haklal alamed. It was in the klal of chayv krisos. It was yotzim min haklal to tell us that it's chorus v'loy malchus. So afal klal kol yotza, it tells us that the entire klal of chorus gets chorus and does not get malchus. That is the svar of Rabbi Yitzchak. So let's just for 1 second get the psukim that Rabbi Yitzchak is referring to. Where was it yotza chorus ba'choisei? So Rashi tells us lama yotzas chorus ba'choisei. This is on Yud Gimel on Beis. La'atzma the chesed Kodshim tiyu v'ish ki yikach es hachoisei. There will be a chi of chorus for it. So that's in the parsha of Kodshim, which talks about all the chayv krisos. Okay. So now the Gemara says Verabon. We have the shita of Rabbi Kiva. We have the shita of Rabbi Shmuel, who both hold that you do get malchus even though there's chorus. So they have this extra choisei. We have to ask you then the question: why did, according to the Rabbanan, meaning Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, why wasn't it necessary for the Torah to specify chorus by a choisei? Lomali zok gemara lechalek, to tell us a very important halacha, which Rashi says, Levi shekolol kol harayis b'chorus echas. Since the Torah put all of the chayv krisos. In other words, the Torah lists off all the chayv krisos. Then all the way at the end, it says, if you do any one of these, you get chorus. I would have mistakenly said, Im osan kulon behelam echad. What if someone did all of these arayis b'shoigik, and he didn't know in between doing these aveiros that there was an yisur involved? I would have mistakenly thought that there's only one chi of chorus because that, or one chi of chatos, because that's how the Torah expresses it, as one big unit. So the Torah specifically said by chorus that by a choisei that there's a chi of chorus. Wasn't necessary to tell us that it's extra, to tell us that you get dafka chorus and not malchus, to have a dover shahoya b'chlal. It was in the klal, choisei was in the klal of all the other arayos. The yotzim in the klal, l'lamed al atzmoi, to teach something special about a choisei, which is a mischayiv oleh al atzma im osam im chavrisam. If you did the arayos of a choisei together with all the other arayos, you would get a special chorus or a special chiv chatos for the aver of a choisei. And therefore we say, v'lo l'lamed al atzma yotza, once something was in the klal, and then we have a special information on one of the items in the klal, we say it doesn't only apply to that item, rather ala klal kula yotze, it applies to the entire klal. Therefore, all the rayis, there's a separate chiyuv chatos for each one. You can't say there's a separate chiyuv chorus. It's not possible to have chorus twice, right? Ma choysa miyuchedes shehi erva, a choysa is an erva v'chayavin aleh b'fnei atzma, and you're chayiv on it by itself. So now the question is going to be, how will Rabbi Yitzchak know that? But before we get to that, the Gemara says, Uchad Rabbi Yochanan, and this follows the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan, Yom Rabbi Yochanan, Shem Asan Kulam Behelam Echad. If someone did all the arayas without knowing any of them were Asr altogether, and then he found out in one fell swoop that all of these things were Asr, Chayiv al Kol Achas V'Achas, he would have to bring a separate carbon for each one of these arayas. Rabbi Yitzchak also agrees that there's a separate chiyuv chatos for each one of these arayos. Oh, 1 second. I don't have sound. I apologize. I don't know if anyone said anything, but I didn't hear anything because I did not have sound. Let me plug in. I hope you'll be able to hear me. Hope you can hear me. If anyone can hear me, could they just say something? I don't know.
We can hear you.
Okay, Gavaldik, thank you. Now I can hear you as well. So Frag to Gemara, what's Rabbi Yitzchak going to do? Rabbi Yitzchak l'chalak minolei, he also has to agree to this. So Gemara, nafkalei, he learns it out from a different pasuk. And now you can already see where today's Gemara is going, because now we're going to be going back and forth with who uses what pasuk for what. So how will Rabbi Yitzchak know this halacha? See, Rabbi Yitzchak spoke up when we were talking about Rabbi Yitzchak. Minolei nafkalei mi ve'el nisha ve'el isha be'nidas tumasa. What did the pasuk say? The matzil michtav, it could have said in the pasuk, ulanida loisekar v'legal servasa, but it doesn't say that. It says el isha v'nidas tumasa. So what's all this extra words? El isha lechayev al kol isha v'isha. So again, nida is also dover shoya bechlal. It's also one of their rayas that's chayev kars. And the Torah taught us by nida that you're chayev for every individual isha that's also. So therefore, all arayas, there's a separate law for each one. Or could be Velisha, we learn directly to all the other arayas, because it says you're chayev al kol isha v'isha, for every individual woman you'll be chayev for. So Freit Gebar, so that's how Rabbi Yitzchak knows it. So now the Rabbanan have an extra pasuk of Ve'elisha. So for Rabbanan Nami, what are they going to do with the Ve'elisha? You're right, we have to backtrack. Achoisa you don't use to tell us that each chiyuv karish gets its own carbon. You actually know that from the same place where Rabbi Yitzchak said it, from Ve'elisha b'nidas tamasa. So then we have to go back again. Why do you need the Torah to tell you a special karish by a choisoi if it's davar shahaya b'chlal? Bishlama, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, he learned from there that you get karish and not malchus. But you, Rabbi Yishmael, and you, Rabbi Kiva, who both hold you do get malchus, even though there's a chiv karish. So why did the Torah tell us karish by a choisoi? So tomorrow, l'chayvoi ala choisoi v'al achos aviv v'al achos imoy. It's to tell you that not only are you chayiv on achoisoi with whom you share a father, or achoisoi with whom you share a mother, if you were boil achoisoi and you were boil achoisovim and achois imoy, 3 separate women, one was achoisoi for both. One was achoisoi. One was achoisoi. I'm completely mixed up. I'm sorry. One is achoisoi, one is his sister, one is his aunt, it's his father's sister, and one who's his aunt is his mother's sister, to tell you that if you did each one of these 3, if you're both each one of these 3, you will have a separate chatos. Frank tomorrow, why would I need a pasuk to tell me that? Pshita. Hare gufin muchalakin, hare shemus muchalakin. It's 3 different averas. It's like you ate pigol, and you ate chazer, and you ate and you did some other avera. There's 3 completely different averas. Why would I need a special pasuk to tell me that there's 3 chayve chatois for this? Elo, you're right. Elo lechayve ala choisoi shehi achois aviv shehi achois imoy. To be mechayiv you on one person. If someone was boiled one person, so it was guf echad, but it's shemus mechlaket. one person who's your sister, it's your aunt because it's your father's sister, and it's your aunt because it's your mother's sister. Now, there'd have to be a crazy scenario that would create such a relationship. It would only be possible there had to be some terrible affairs happening to create these matches. And Rashi tells us what the case was. So first, Bal Ima. You have let's say we'll call him Bob. Bob, who's Jewish, was Bal Ima. I'm using Bob because hopefully Reuben will not be Bal Ima. So Bob was Bal Ima. So that was Avera number one. So his mother was a Rishia because she was novellas to her son. Habal Ima, and he had two daughters. So now these two daughters are Bob's sisters, right? They're Bob's sisters, and they're the children of Bob. They're also Bob's daughters, and they're also Bob's mother's daughters. V'chazar uba al achas mehen, and then Bob was ba on one of these two daughters. So this son is Bob's son, but it's also Bob's. It's also Bob's. No, one second. So no, so now these two girls are Sai his sisters, and they're Sai his children. Then he was born one of his daughters, who's also one of his sisters, right? There was a son there. Now now this son comes and on his mother's sister. So first of all, it's his mother's sister, right? Because these two girls were born together from one of these sisters are his mother. So he's born his mother's sister. He was also ba on Achoisoi. It's also his sister because they share a father, right? And it's also his father's sister because his father shares a mother with these children. So you have all three together. So it's Gof Echad. And it's Shem Echad. How do you know that there's three Chiyuve Chatois for this? We know it because Yotza occurs b'Achoisoi. So Frek the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak Haminoli. How will Rabbi Yitzchak know that in this case there's three Chiyuv Chatois? So Gemara, Nafgalei Mikal V'Chomer. He learns it from a Kal V'Chomer. The Tanya, Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva asked, Sha'alti is Rabbi Gamliel for Rabbi Yeshua. Where did I ask him this question? The Itlis Shal Imam in the meat market of the city of Imam. And the Mepharshim speak out that even when they were by the butcher, Matkaret learning. Shahalchu likach. What was he doing there? Shahalchu likach behema lemishte benoi Rabbi Gamliel. They went to buy an animal for the wedding of Rabbi Gamliel. They didn't call the caterer. They went to buy an animal so that they could make a chasna. You see how simple chasnas were in those days. And what was the shayla we discussed there? Habal achoisoi she'achos ovid she'achos himoi ma what's the halacha? Einoi chayiv al kulan ala achas. Do you say there's only one chiv? Oi chayiv al kol achas v'achas. Or is there a separate chiv for each one? Omruloi, they told him, zuloi shemanu. Exactly this case, we didn't hear someone paskin on beferish. Avo shemanu, we heard something similar, which is as follows. Haba chomish noshim nidois be'elam echad. What if someone is ba on 5 different women, but they each have the same isser? They're each a nida, and he didn't know about the isser in between. The halach is shechayiv al kol achas v'achas. You have to bring 5 chatois, and therefore, once we know this halacha, we could make a kal v'chomer to the shaila of this achoisoi she'achoisov she'achoisimoi. For near in the var mikal v'chomer uma nida madich nida she'ishem echad. It's one lav. Nevertheless, chayiv al kol achas v'achas, because it's gufin mechlochin. Kan sheshloisha shemois. Here, where it's 3 different averis, it's achoisoi, it's achois oviv, and it's achois himoi. Like kol shekain, surely you should be chayiv al kol achas v'achas. So therefore, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. I could learn it out of a kal v'chomer. That's what the Rebbe would say. But the Rabbanan didn't need the pasuk of achoisoi, right? Lama yotzes kars b'achoisoi to tell us just this. Why couldn't they learn it out of the same kal v'chomer that we just made over here? The kal v'chomer frichahu. It's not a good kal v'chomer. You know why by nida you're chay 5 chatois? Shekain guf mal nida shekain gufan muchlokin. There were 5 different women, but here it's all one woman. So therefore you don't have a raya. So how do I know that there's three separate chatois? I need a pasuk of a choisoi. That's why it's yotza koros b'choisoi. Let me just quick look at the base. The idich nami. So v'idich nami hi vadai kavachomer prichim. Even according to Rabbi Yitzchak, this is not a good kavachomer. So if it's not a good kavachomer, so how does Rabbi Yitzchak know that these three averos together, achoisoi, chois avav, and achoisimoi, gets three chatois? El nafkala, he learns it out of a different pasuk. Me'achoisoi the seifa from the achoisoi in the seifa. What does it say in the seifa? The ish asher yikach es achoisoi bas aviv oy bas imoi v'ra es arvasa. So this is the achoisoi b'reisha. V'tir es arvasoi chesaru v'nichresu le'enoi b'nei amav ervas achoisoi gila avoy neisoi. So the second achoisoi. From the second achoisoi, I would know why is this pasuk. It's extra. It's extra to tell me that even if someone who's born, these three women together, on this one woman who carries three Yisurim together, he will get three Chichu v'chatas. V'idach achoisoi the Sefer Lamun. So what is Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel going to do with this achoisoi? So the more lechayvoi al achoisoi bas aviv ubasimon. We only know in the pasuk it says v'isha sheikach has achoisoi either bas aviv or basimoi. How do you know if he shares with this sister a mother and a father? How do you know there's a chiyuv chorus there as well? That's because of the extra word achoisoi. Why can't you just learn it from a kol v'chaymer? Madach if you only share a mother or if you only share a father, it's also there's a chiyuv chorus. Kol shekain if you share both. The teretz is you can't be mechayiv people with anything through a kol v'chaymer. Loymar she'ein einchin min adin. So frank the Gemara. So then, if the limud of ein einchin min adin comes from the fact that the Torah spoke at achoisoi b'seifa, even though we would have known it from a kol v'chaymer, so then according to Rabbi Yitzchak, how do you know that ein einchin min adin? V'idich either ibayisema gomer einish me'asara. Even though I don't have this extra achoisoi because I need it to be mechayiv me on one lady who's a choisoi and a choisov and a choisimoi, but it doesn't matter because I could learn oinish from asara because the asara is in achremois where the Torah says this or there it does say an extra choisoi. There we are told that even if it's a choisov and a choisimoi, I'm sorry, even if it's a choisoi me'av and a choisoi me'imoi both together, that there's a law for it. Once you know there's a law for it, you automatically know that there's an oynish for it. You don't need a separate psukim for it. As Rashi says, Gomer oynish me'asar, Talina asar ksiv achoischahi l'sigal arvasa. And it's extra over there in Achimois, lahazer ala choisoi basavav ubasimoi. From there we learn that even if he shares both a father and a mother, there's an issue for that as well. Shnemer ervas bas eishes avicha, moiledes avicha, achoischahi. That's the extra achoischahi. Uma asara. Loy chilek ben achoisoi bas oviv shaloi bas imoi ubas imoi shaloi bas oviv ulachois she bas oviv ubas imoi. Just like by the law, you see that the pasuk specifically says that bas oviv and bas imoi are included. So aboinish we can automatically apply to the einish even though we don't have a mafurish pasuk. On shalachoisoi bas oviv imoi just like achoisoi the bas oviv shaloi bas imoi ubas imoi shaloi bas oviv. Okay, or maybe the way Rabbi Yitzchak knows there's halacha meinanchim min adin, and he knows that a choisoi is both aviv and imoi, who's both from aviv and imoi, that there's a chiyuv kares for. He buys him in nafkalei from another pasuk. Nafkalei may achoisoi the reisha. He learns it from the achoisoi of the reisha. So as Rashi could have said, kigach ish es bas aviv oy bas imoi, but the Torah says kigach ish es achoisoi bas aviv bas imoi. If it's bas avav or bas imoi, I know it's a choisoi. The Torah speaks out the extra word a choisoi. That's how I learn a special oidish for bas avav bas imoi, and therefore I know ein oinchum in it. The idich oy bezay. Now I have to go back to Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. What are they going to do with the achoisoi in the reisha of this pasuk? So tomorrow who we boile lechalek kores lemefatem ulasach. If someone was mefatem, meaning he made the exact recipe of the Shem HaMishcha or he smeared with the Shem and the Mishcha. If you did both, you get 2 creases. Why would I think you don't get 2 creases? Zokt Rashi, because the Havanami Shnei Lavin the Korasech. The Torah says a special lav, don't be mafatim. And the Torah says a special lav, don't be soch. But when it talks about the chorus, it says, because if you do one of these, you get chorus. So since there's only one mention of chorus for these 2 lavin, how do we know that you get 2 creases? Or you have to bring 2 chatois if you did both? When the question is, how is a choisoi that's talking about a rice, how would that have any impact whatsoever on mefatem and soch? Since the achoisoi of the Reisha is completely extra, according to Rabbi Kiva and according to Rabbi Shmuel, we'll say that extra achoisoi is not lechalek by achoisoi. We'll use it lechalek that there's a separate chorus for mefatim and soch. V'idach, how will Rabbi Yitzchak know by mefatim and soch that they each have a separate chiyuv chatos? Savar Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav Hoshia. He will hold like Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav Hoshia. What did Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav Hoshia tell us? Amar Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav Hoshia kol makom shata moitze shnei lavin v'karis echad. Whenever you have a case where there's 2 lavin, but the Torah only says 1 chorus for both of them, as in the case of mefatim and soch, chaluk ein lekarbon. We don't need a special limud. That's a given that they're chaluk and lekarbon. It's built in because there are 2 lavin. I don't need a special limit for it. So therefore, even though Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel use this extra choisha in the Reisha to tell us that you get chorus or a special carbon for mefatim and for soch, according to Rabbi Elazar, I don't need that limit. It has no shaykhs, as Rashi says, but it's in legufay. Since we have an extra word of choisha by a rayis, we apply it to something that's completely across the map. We apply it to mefatim and to soch. Okay, Gabaltik. So that takes care of that. The boyisema, or even if you want to say that Rabbi Yitzchak lo savar like Rabbi Elazar, even if he doesn't like Rabbi Elazar, he still has another place where he could learn it from. The nafkalei, he could learn it from the ish asher yishkav as isha dava. This is also extra referring to the isser of nida. And Rashi says the chsiv bei karis yisera. There's an extra chorus there by nida. Loimer shechayavin alel la'atzma, to say that you're chayiv for it itself. Umimeno tilmad kol haklal. That's how we will learn that every klal, every isser has its own chiyuv chorus. So that's how we would know it. How do you know that soch and fatim each bring a separate chiyuv chatos? He doesn't learn it from a choisoi. He learns it from the ish asher yishkav as isha dava. The main in lugufa. You don't need it to tell you this halacha by nida. Why? The nafkalam mivel isha. We just learned it earlier. Vel isha benidas tumasa separates each woman. There's a separate chiyuv chatos for each one. Lachalak akol isha. Therefore, tanei leini l'shar shnei lavin v'karis echad kodem mefatim v'soch. Whenever you find 2 lavin that is combined with 1 chorus, we learn from ish asher yishkav as yisha dava by nida that there's 2 chiyuv chatos for it. Okay, so then what is Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Kiva going to do from the Isha Sheyishkav and Ishadav? And we buy like Rabbi Yochanan, the whole new halacha with Nida. Then Rabbi Yochanan, Mishra Shimon Yochi, Minayin Sheini Isha Matama, Tameya, Ache Yetze Madve Derech Harvasa. How do you know that the only time Dam Nida is Matamaher or Dam Ziva is Matamaher if it comes out of her Makam Erva? But what if there's a surgery and the dam comes out not through the makam erva? There would be no tuma. There's no tumas nida. There's no tumas ziva unless the dam came out of the proper channel. That's what he learns from there. Shenemar v'ish asher yishkav isha dava v'gilas hervasa malamed shein isha tameya achayetze madve derech hervasa. So then you might ask, how will Rabbi Yitzchak know that? Maybe Rabbi Yitzchak argues. Maybe Yitzchak holds that no matter how Dam Nida gets out of the makar, it will still be Metamher. So basically, we were going back and forth, because the fact is that Rabbi Yitzchak used the Achoisai, Lama Yotzakars B'Achoisai, to tell us that Einoi Loika, and you don't get malchus in the case of chorus. So we have to find another limud for it. So that took us through a whole bunch of halachas. So if we just do a quick run through the different halachas that came out of this back and forth, so we'll at least benefit from those halachas. So the first halacha that we learned from it was to be mechayiv three karbanos, three chuy v'chatos for someone who's bala choisoi, shia chois aviv, shia chois imai. Now, because of that, we had to find an extra pasuk, so that we would find this halacha for Rebbe Yitzchak as well. So we came out with another halacha of being mechayiv someone who did an issue that we would have known anyway through a kavach, like a sister with whom you share both a father and a mother. We needed a special pasuk to tell us that there's a chiyuv kares on, even though we could have known it from a kavach to tell us ein oinchim min adin, right? And then we had another halacha that came in to the mix, which was whether or not there's a separate chiyuv chatos for mefatem and for soch. And then we had the last halacha is dam nida metame if it didn't come out there. Okay, gewaltig. The tamei she'achal as hakodesh. The next case mentioned in the Mishnah of someone who gets malchus is someone who's tamei who ate kodshim. So zok the Gemara bishlema habol lemikdash tamei. I know that there's a pasuk that tells you that if someone walks into the base of mikdash when he's tamei, he has a chiyuv. There's a chiyuv kares and allow for it. Ksiv oynish uksiv ashar. The Torah says the oynish and the Torah says the ashar. Oynish d'chsiv es mishkan Hashem timei v'nichrisa. So let's look at these sukim inside. That's the base. It's called negeh b'meis b'nefesh odom asher yamus v'lo yischata es mishkan Hashem timei. So clearly he was tamei. He went into the mishkan. He's been tamei the mishkan v'nichrisa an nefesh ahimi Yisrael kimei nida lo zar kalov. That is the oynish. That is the oynish where someone was tamei and he went into the base of mikdash. Asara. How do you know where the Torah say you're not allowed to do it? Because it says v'lo yitamu es machaneim. Zok. Let's look at the whole pasuk so we get a little bit of context. It says mizachar ad nekeva tishalechu el michutz lamachane. Make sure to send anybody who's tamei out of the machane, meaning don't let them get near the base of mikdash or the mishkan. The shalchim, send them v'lo yitamu es machaneim ashani b'soichem shani shoichem b'soichem. So you have a lav and you have noinish. That's how we know someone going into the base of mikdash when he is tamei. However, where do you find an oynish and an ashara for a tamei who ate kodshim? Bishlem oynish ksiv ba'nefesh asher toichal basar mizevach hashlomim asher l'Hashem v'utum asay alav v'nichrisa. So it says quite clearly that if one eats kodshim when he's tamei, he gets kares. But ela ashar minayin, the Torah never says one should not eat kodshim when one is tamei. So Gemara Shlakish Omer, you know where I know it from? I know it from Bechal Kodesh Loy Siga. This is in Pashas Tazria. It says that when a woman is tamei after she gives birth, Bechal Kodesh Loy Siga. Now, what do the words say? One should not touch Kodesh. We're looking for a makar that one may not eat kodshim when they're tamei. So we're going to see in a second. Rashi tells us even though it says b'chal kodesh lo siga, it's referring to achila, not negia, because the Gemara is going to tell us that there's no chiyuv kares ever for touching kodshim. It might not be a good thing to do, but there's no chiyuv kares for somebody who touches kodshim when they're tamei. Rabbi Yochanan Omer Tanei Bardala, the Tanoim in Bardala taught us Asya Tumasoi. When it's talking about the oynish of eating kodshim when you're tamei, it says like we just read. V'nichus gets cards. This is by going into the Mishkan, right? It says kol hanegea b'nefesh adam. We already read it earlier in reference to someone going into the base of mikdash when he's tamei. So it says tumasai in reference to eating kodshim when one is tamei. It says tumasai in reference to going into the base of mikdash where one is tamei. Mal halon oynish vasar. Just like going into the base of mikdash with tuma, we've already demonstrated that there's a pasuk for the Einish and there's a pasuk for the Asara, Afkan, so too we will apply that to eating Kodshim when one is Tamei, Afkan Einish Vasar. So these are the two pshatim, either Bechal Chodesh Leisiga or from the Gzera Shalav to Moshe to Moshe. So the Gemara wants to know why did Rabbi Yochanan say his shita and not Rish Lakish's, and vice versa. So Bishlam Rish Lakish le'amak Rabbi Yochanan. Why Rish Lakish didn't say the same shas as Rabbi Yochanan? It's the Gzera Shava from Tomasoi, because Gzera Shava like Amir. He didn't have the Gzera Shava. You're not allowed to make up your own Gzera Shavas, which is a little bit difficult to understand because Rabbi Yochanan was a Rebbe of Rish Lakish. So we have to figure out how that would work. Ella, Rabbi Yochanan, my time aloi Rish Lakish. Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan like the pasuk of Bechal Chodesh Leisiga to be the lav for eating Kodshim when one is tamei? Amar Lach, I'll tell you why Rabbi Yochanan didn't want to use that for the lav, because Ahu Ashar Truma. Bechal Chodesh Leisiga is not referring to Kodshim. That's referring to the Isser of eating Truma when one is tamei. Okay? So therefore, I can't use it for Kodshim. Where does Rish Lakish see the lav for someone who's tamei to eat truma? So tomorrow nafkale ish mizer Aaron v'hutzarua oizov. So let's look at the whole pasuk again, so we get a little bit of context. It says in the pasuk, ish mizer Aaron v'hutzarua oizov ba'kodshim lo yoichel ad asher yitar. Okay, so this sounds like it's speaking about Kodshim, but we just said that Rish Lakish is going to use this to be the lav of someone who is eating truma when he is tamei. So nachmal Rish Lakish harol truma nalei nafkalei mi ish mizar arabu turazov. Now, why would you say this is speaking about truma and not Kodshim? We just read the pasuk. It seems very much like it's speaking about Kodshim, right? The lashon again was v'ishish mizar Aaron ba'kodshim lo yoichel. So why would you say that this b'kodshim means truma? So the Gemara ezehu davar shu shava bezari shel Aaron. It says ishish mizar Aaron. Any child of Aaron, it doesn't matter if he's a male or a female, he still is allowed to eat it. Have oimer zu truma, because we know most Kodshim are only eaten lezichrei kahuna. But truma is eaten by any zera aharon. So therefore, since the pasuk is talking to zera aharon, it must be referring to truma because it's referring to something that any zera aharon can eat. When they're tar, the Torah is saying don't eat it when you're tamei. V'idich. So what is Rabbi Yochanan going to do with this pasuk ish mizera aharon? Because he already knows from the Chodesh Leisiga that a tamei person may not eat truma. So v'idich Rabbi Yochanan will say hahu lachila v'ha l'negia. They're both referring to truma. One pasuk, B'chol Kodesh Leisiga, is telling you that you're not allowed to touch truma when you're tamei, and the pasuk of Ishish Mizera Aaron is telling you that you're not allowed to eat. Now that opens up a whole new question: how can you eat truma without touching it? So you have to have someone sticks it into your throat, so you didn't touch it. V'reish Lakish, Hai B'chol Kodesh Leisiga Lahach Yudasa. You Reish Lakish, you're learning pshat in the pasuk in Tazria to tell you that you're not allowed to eat Kodshim when you're tamei. Is that what it's referring to? But ahumi boile, don't we need it for something else? L'tamei shenaga b'kodesh. Don't we need it to tell us that tamei shenaga b'kodesh is also the itmar, because we actually learned halacha. Tamei shenaga b'kodesh. A person that was tamei who touched kodesh, Rish Lakish Eimer Loika. Rish Lakish holds there's a law for it. There's an Isser law for someone who's tamei to touch Kodshim. Rabbi Yochanan ain't like you don't get makos. What is this for Rish Lakish? Rish Lakish Eimer Loika because Bechal Kodesh Leisiga. So you Rish Lakish, how could you tell me that Bechal Kodesh Leisiga is to tell you that you're not allowed to eat Kodshim when you're tamei? You yourself learned out of Bechal Kodesh Leisiga that you're not allowed to touch Kodshim when you're tamei. Rabbi Yochanan ain't like because he learns Bechal Kodesh Leisiga is that who azar the truma hudasa, like we said earlier. Rabbi Yochanan knows that's talking about truma, but you Rish Lakish, you learn it's talking about kodesh, but you learn it's talking about the isser to touch kodesh. So how can you tell me now that it's talking about the isser to eat kodesh? Zokt Gemara, tamei shenaga bekodesh nida'af karachbana beloshen negia. We know for sure, Zokt Rish Lakish, that when it says Bechal Kodesh Leisiga, the isser is to eat it. But the question is, why would the Torah use the term b'chol kodesh leisiga if it's trying to tell me an iser to eat kachin when I'm tamei? So since we know that really the iser of b'chol kodesh leisiga refers to achila, how do we know that? We'll get to in a minute. But since we know for a fact that the b'chol kodesh leisiga must be speaking about achila, then the question is, why did the Torah use the word leisiga? So therefore, we know that it's both. Asara ishkis kodesh lemikdash. The way we know, here's a little funny over here, but the way we know that b'chol kodesh leisiga must be referencing eating kachim because of ishkis kodesh lemikdash, and therefore we know side the lav to touch kachim when you're tummy, and side the asara for the isher kares of eating kachim when you're tummy. So how do we know that the b'chol kodesh leisiga must be referencing eating and not only touching? So Zok Rashi, very important. In this pasuk of B'chal Kodesh Leisiga, you know what else it says in that pasuk? The next words is Ve'la Mikdash Leisavle. So the Torah in Parshas Tazriah, when it's talking about Yeledes, combines the Isser of touching Kodesh to the Isser of going into the Beis Hamikdash. V'dashin l'kamon, the Gemara is shortly going to tell us, Ma Mikdash yesh baz arasa netilos l'shama. We know for a fact that if someone is tamei and he goes into the Beis Hamikdash, he's chayiv kares, right? Shabal Hamikdash tamei b'kares. So it must be that the b'chol kodesh leisiga is also referring to a violation that if you violate it, you'll be chayiv kares. So therefore, af asaris kodesh b'chol kodesh leisiga must be speaking about davar sheyesh by netilos neshama. Now, touching kachim, even though it's usher, you definitely don't get kares for touching kachim when you're tamei. Only v'hainu achila she'onish kares alel. The ilu b'negia like a kares. So therefore, Rish Lakish could learn side the iser of touching kachim when you're tamei from the b'chol kodesh leisiga, and side the iser of eating kachim when you're tamei from the b'chol kodesh leisiga, because b'chol kodesh leisiga has to be speaking about something that has a chi of kares, because that's what the Bel HaMikdash leisavei gets you. So it has to be a chila. So Ibazai shouldn't have said b'chol kodesh leisiga. It should be b'chol kodesh leisichel. And so that we also learn a lot to touch kachim when you are tamei. Okay, Gavalt. Fact the more, but Rish Lakish is not out of the wood yet. You're telling me, Rish Lakish, that the Kodesh Leisiga is to tell you that you're not allowed to eat kachim when you're tamei, and you're not allowed to touch kachim when you're tamei. But Humi Baile, L'tamei she'achal basar kodesh l'fnei zrikas adamim. We learn from limudim that when there's a chiyuv kares, if you eat basar kodesh when you're tamei, that's if the basar kodesh is otherwise edible. But before Zrika, you're not allowed to eat the basar kodesh. So how do you know that if someone tamei ate basar kodesh and the basar kodesh was not roy lachil yet because you didn't do the Zrika yet? How do you know is well over there that it's a chiyuv kares? So Gemara, from Ahui Bailei the tamei shachol basar kodesh l'fnei Zrika's damim. Dietmar tamei shachol basar kodesh l'fnei Zrika's damim. Rish Lakish omer like it. Rish Lakish holds you get makos for it. Rabbi Yechon omer ain't like it. Rish Lakish omer like it because it says b'chol kodesh l'siga. So clearly, Rish Lakish is like overusing this pasuk of b'chol l'siga because he's using it for you're not allowed to touch kachim when you're tamei, you're not allowed to eat kachim when you're tamei, and you're not allowed to eat kachim even before Zrika Adam. How did he know that from? He knows it from here. Loishna l'fnei Zrika, loishna lachas Zrika. Rabbi Yechon omer ain't like it. Rabbi Yechon tamei damar kra tumasai. The pasuk of b'chol kodesh l'siga is only referring to something that has a chiyuv kares, right? This is what we said a moment ago in Rish Lakish. The chiksiv tumasai la'achar zrika hu deksiv. When it says tumasai, it's la'achar zrika. What is it tumasai? Tumasai zokt the Hilig Rashi. Tumasai the tumasai. It says the masar lechol kodesh b'tumasai nafka mi tumasai. We learned it earlier. We said earlier. You know it from the Gzer Shava. It says oid tumasai boy, and it says v'tumasai alav. Right. So we learned that it's speaking about a chiyuv kares only. So therefore, you don't find any lav for eating kachim when you're tamei before the zrika's number. The chiksiv tumasai la'achar zrika hu dechsiv, where it says oy tumasai boy is speaking after zrika, because that's when there's chiyuv kares. Dechsiv. How do I know that? Because mi b'chol kodesh nafka. I'm sorry, I make a mistake. The chiksiv to Moshe period. That is what Rabbi Yochanan's shita is. And he says, "V'hu Masay love the chsiv b'onish the kodesh is la'achar zrikahu." How do we know that it's achar zrika? The Tanya b'Torah Kehanim u'ma'asin lo b'menachos b'perek shlishi yochel yuchayav in the law mishum tuma kodim zrika. You might have thought there's a chiyuv for eating kodshim when you're tamei, even though there's no zrikas dam yet. Talmud Leimer called toyar yoichal basar, and then right after that it says v'nefesh asher toichal basar when they're tamei. So we learn from here that on niter l'tahirin basar that you could say on it called Torah yoichal basar, meaning achar zrikas damim. Only such basar is chayav in a love mishum tuma. But you ain't niter l'tahirin. If it's meat that anyway even a tar can't eat because it's premature, because the zrikas dam didn't occur yet, ain't chayav in a love mishum tuma. There'll be no chayav tuma. But at the end of the day, we're stuck because we learned from the Kodshim Lesiga this halacha that you get makos if you eat Kodshim and Tuma, Kodshim zrikas damim. Where does Reish Lakish know that from? So Bechol Kodshim Lesiga has a lot of room to darshan. It could have said Kodshim Lesiga. What is Bechol Kodshim Lesiga? To tell you that even if it's before zrikas dam. Okay, now at least we got down the two shittas of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, and it was all about one thing. How do you know that eating kodshim when you're tamei? Where do you see chayiv kares and where do you see a lot? So Tanya Kavos said to Reish Lakish, we're going to bring a brisa that's going to support the position of Reish Lakish, because the brisa says b'chol kodesh lo siga ashara lo oichel. That's exactly what Reish Lakish said. The law for oichel comes from b'chol kodesh lo siga. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan said it was from the Gzer Shavav to Moshe to Moshe. Atayim ashara lo oichel oyeinu ela ashara lo doikeya. Tamaloi b'chol kodesh lo siga ve'lamikdash. Even though it uses lashon leisiga, but we know it's compared to the Isser Tumah of going into the base of Mikdash for your Tumah. Makish Kodesh L'Mikdash, which is what we discussed earlier a moment ago. Makish Kodesh L'Mikdash. Ma Mikdash Davar Sheyesh Bo Netilas Neshama. Just like Vel Mikdash Loisava comes with it a penalty of karetz. Af Kol Davar Sheyesh Bo Netilas Neshama. So too, when it says B'chol Kodesh L'Siga, it must be talking about an aveira that has the penalty of karetz. So even if the pasuk literally means what it says, b'chol kodesh loisiga miika netilas neshama, there wouldn't be netilas neshama. There's no chiv kares for touching kodshim when you're tamei. Ela b'achila must be referring to achila. So now b'chol kodesh loisiga, according to Reish Lakish, is chock full of limudim. From b'chol kodesh, we learn that even kodshim before zrika, there's an isur lav to eat it when you're tamei. B'chol kodesh loisiga, the word says siga. So there's a law to touch kodshim when you're tamei, but loisiga can't literally mean that because there has to be a chiv kares, so it must also be speaking about Israel. Amar Rabba Barachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol loisase shekod mayasei loikinov. We know there's a term called a lav hanitek lasei. The Torah says don't steal. If you steal, v'heishu v'segzela shegazim. But what if the Torah first says dasei and then says the lav? Is that also called a lav hanitek lasei? And we're gonna soon see examples of that scenario. Amruloi, they told him, so who's talking over here? Rabbi Barachana is talking. Amruloi, they told him, Amrit, did you actually say that? So they asked, Rabbi Barachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So I guess they asked Rabbi Yochanan, did you actually say that? Amruloi, I never said that. And Rashi says, what it means is Chazar boy, I don't stand by that. Amar Rabba Halakim, so he made a shvur. I know Rabbi Yochanan taught that to us. Amar, I know he said it. And uksiva and utinina. It's a pasuk and it's a brisa. Ksiva vishalchu mina machane. It says that if someone's tamei, you send them away from the machane. That's why this is relevant to us, because we've been talking about the chiyuv kares if someone is tamei and he goes into the base of Mikdash. It says vishalchu mina machane, and only after that it says v'lo yitamu es machaneya. So that's an example of an assay that's before the loisaseh, and it doesn't have the status of halav hanitik lasei. We will stop here and we will, Hashem, continue tomorrow. Everyone should have